Right now, there is a part of your brain that still lives in a world that no longer exists. A world of tribes, predators, and survival. And yet, that ancient machinery still shapes the way you think, feel, and behave today. This is Primitive Mind Lab, where evolution meets human nature. You opened an app for 30 seconds. 45 minutes later, you're still there, scrolling through the lives of people you barely know, watching videos you didn't choose, reading arguments you have no stake in, and when you finally put the phone down, there's this odd, hollow feeling. Not satisfaction, not rest. Something closer to the aftertaste of eating food that tasted like nothing. You've probably blamed yourself for this. Told yourself you lack discipline. That you're weak, distracted, addicted to something shallow. But what if the real explanation has nothing to do with your character? What if it has everything to do with the fact that you are a 3 million-year-old animal living inside a 30-year-old machine, and no one told you that the machine was built to win? To understand what social media actually does to you, we need to go somewhere far from any screen. We need to go back. Imagine a savanna in East Africa. The sky is enormous. The grass stretches in every direction. A small group of people, maybe 30, maybe 50, are moving through the landscape together. They forage, they rest, they argue, they laugh, they bury their dead and name their children and sit around fires, telling stories about what the world is made of. This is where you come from. Not metaphorically, literally. For roughly 95% of human evolutionary history, this is the world your nervous system was shaped to navigate. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar studied social group sizes across hundreds of human cultures and primate species, and he found something remarkable. Humans consistently maintain close social bonds with around 150 people. Not because of culture, because of brain size, because of the neocortex, the region responsible for social cognition, which in humans grew, across millions of years, in direct proportion to the complexity of our social lives. Your brain is, in the most fundamental sense, a social organ. It evolved not to solve abstract problems or compose symphonies, but to track other people, their intentions, their loyalties, their status, their emotional states. The cognitive machinery you use to understand a friend's silence, to read the subtle hostility behind a compliment, to remember who owes whom a favor, that machinery is ancient. It is the product of an evolutionary arms race in which the smartest social animal survived and the isolated one did not. Because here is what your ancestors understood at a cellular level. Being alone was death. Exclusion from the group didn't mean hurt feelings. It meant no one to help you when the predators came. No one to share food when the rains failed. No one to hold the infant while you slept. For most of human history, social rejection was not an emotional wound. It was a physical threat, and your brain evolved accordingly, wiring the fear of rejection directly into the same neural circuitry that processes physical pain. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger conducted a now famous study at UCLA in which participants played a virtual ball-tossing game. When they were excluded from the game, ignored by digital players left out, their brains lit up in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. The same regions activated by physical pain. The same regions that fire when you burn your hand or break a bone. Social pain and physical pain in the brain are not metaphors for each other. They are the same experience processed by the same tissue. This means that when you feel anxious about a post that got no response, or when you feel that small, irrational sting of seeing a gathering you weren't invited to, you are not being oversensitive. You are experiencing an ancient alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. It is telling you, pay attention. Someone out there may not want you. And in the world this system was built for, that mattered enormously. Now layer on top of that a second drive, one equally ancient, equally powerful. Humans are information foragers. Just as we evolved to scan the environment for food and danger, we evolved to scan it for relevant social information. Who has power? Who is fertile? Who is forming new alliances? What has changed since I last looked? Neuroscientist Irving Biederman studied what happens in the brain when we process novel visual information and found that the mu-opioid receptors, the same receptors involved in the pleasure of food and touch, become active during acts of curiosity and discovery. Learning something new, encountering the unexpected, briefly resolving uncertainty. These experiences trigger a mild, repeatable hit of endogenous opioids. Not metaphorical pleasure, neurochemical pleasure. The brain rewards you for staying curious because, in the ancestral environment, the curious animal was the one who found the berries, noticed the rival tribe, survived the season. This is the second piece of the architecture. You have a brain built to monitor social dynamics and rewarded at the chemical level for acquiring new information. Both of these drives evolved in a world where information was scarce and social groups were small. You might learn one genuinely surprising thing in a day. You might encounter 3 meaningful social updates in a week. Now hold that picture. In 2004, a college student in a dorm room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, launched a website. By 2012, it had 1 billion users. By 2023, it had 3 billion. Facebook and the ecosystem it spawned was not built to make you happier or more connected in any deep sense. It was built to capture and monetize your attention. And to do that effectively, its architects needed to understand something that evolutionary psychologists had been studying for decades: what the human brain finds impossible to ignore. The answer, it turns out, is not entertainment. It is not even pleasure, exactly. It is social information, specifically uncertain social information. Information about status, about belonging, about how others perceive you. The same information your ancestors needed to track obsessively to survive. Dopamine is commonly described as the brain's pleasure chemical, but neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz's research revealed something more precise and more disturbing. Dopamine is not released at the moment of reward. It is released in anticipation of a possible reward, and most powerfully when the outcome is uncertain. Slot machines do not pay every time. Neither does social media. You post something and you don't know if anyone will respond. You open the app and you don't know what you'll find. That variability, that not knowing, is precisely what keeps the dopamine system engaged. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling seductive. And it is not an accident. Former president of Pinterest Paul Sciarra and early engineers at major platforms have spoken openly about studying behavioral psychology and variable reward schedules when designing the core mechanics of these applications. The infinite scroll, no endpoint, no pause, no natural stopping point, mimics the foraging patterns your brain expects to inhabit. The notification, a small, unpredictable signal that someone, somewhere, has responded to your existence, triggers the same social monitoring circuitry that kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. The algorithmic feed doesn't show you what's new. It shows you what your brain has already proven it cannot look away from: conflict, status displays, in-group signals, the unexpected. Every element of the design speaks directly to the ancient machinery underneath your modern mind. And this is where millions of years of evolution collide with the infinite scroll. Here is the strange, almost tragic center of this story. The same drive that built human civilization, the hunger for connection, the need to know where you stand among your people, is what these platforms exploit most efficiently. Social media promises to satisfy the most ancient of human needs: to belong, to be seen, to know what is happening among your tribe. And in a narrow, technical sense, it delivers. You do receive signals about how others perceive you. You do receive new information constantly. The ancient brain registers these inputs as meaningful. But the ancient brain did not evolve to distinguish between a genuine social bond and a number, between a real conversation and a comment thread, between a shared meal and a liked photograph. Psychologist Sherry Turkle, who spent decades studying how technology shapes human relationships, described a phenomenon she called being alone together. deeply connected by devices while simultaneously more isolated than ever. The social nutrition you receive on these platforms is like refined sugar. The brain responds to it, craves more of it, and yet it does not satisfy the deeper hunger it mimics. John Twenge's longitudinal research following American adolescents found that the rise in smartphone use after 2012 correlates strongly with increases in loneliness, depression, and anxiety, particularly in girls. Not because the teenagers using these platforms are weak or broken or failed by their parents, but because the social monitoring circuitry that was designed to track 30 people now tracks 300, 3,000, 3 million, and it was never built for that load. The ancient system signals alarm and inadequacy, not because something is wrong with you, but because something is wrong with the match between the tool and the animal using it. This is called an evolutionary mismatch. It is a concept that runs through almost every chronic struggle of modern life, and it is worth sitting with. Your sweet tooth evolved because in the ancestral environment, sugar was rare and valuable. Ripe fruit, wild honey, found briefly and seasonally. The craving to consume it was adaptive then. It is harmful now because sugar is no longer rare. The mismatch between the craving and the environment is what creates the problem. The craving itself is not pathological. It is ancient and reasonable and completely understandable once you know where it came from. Social media is the same story, playing out in the domain of social cognition. The drive to monitor your social environment, to seek status signals, to know who has noticed you and who has not. All of that is ancient and adaptive and deeply human. What is new is the environment, one in which those drives are available for activation at any moment, at any scale, curated by algorithms that have spent years learning exactly which inputs you cannot resist. You are not weak for using social media compulsively. You are not shallow for caring how many people responded to what you shared. You are an animal whose most sophisticated, most essential cognitive machinery is being addressed constantly, deliberately, at scale, by systems built by the smartest engineers on Earth, using the most detailed behavioral data ever assembled for the express purpose of capturing your attention. That is not a fair fight. You are not competing with an app. You are competing with a machine that learned the language of your instincts. And yet, and this matters, none of this means you are helpless. Understanding is not the same as surrender. In fact, it may be the beginning of something else entirely. When you feel the pull of the scroll, you are feeling something ancient trying to find its purpose in a new world. When you post something and wait for the response, your nervous system is doing what nervous systems evolved to do, reaching out, seeking confirmation of your place among others. When you find yourself watching someone else's life and feeling something complicated, something between longing and comparison and unexplained sadness, you are not broken. You are human in an environment that didn't exist long enough ago for your biology to know the difference. The philosopher Albert Camus wrote that the absurd is born from the confrontation between the human need for clarity and the world's unreasonable silence. Something similar lives at the heart of this story. Your brain was built for a world that no longer exists, a world of fires and faces and the smell of rain on soil and the sound of 30 familiar voices. And now it reaches, as it has always reached, for connection, for meaning, for the reassurance that you are seen. It just reaches through a screen. The knowledge of why this happens does not make the pull disappear, but it changes the texture of it. You are not fighting a personal failing. You are navigating an ancient set of needs in a world that has not yet learned how to honor them properly. You are a mind that evolved to belong to something small and warm and close, trying to find its footing in something vast and cold and infinite. And knowing that, really knowing it, is the first step toward looking at yourself with something other than blame. You are not the problem. You are the proof that the most human thing there is, the need to be known, to be part of something, to reach toward another mind, is so old and so deep and so fundamental that even the most powerful technology ever built can only work by borrowing its shape. Long before notifications, long before algorithms, long before screens, the need to belong was already there. The hunger is not the enemy. The hunger is the oldest thing about you. If you found this interesting, remember, your mind wasn't designed for the modern world. It was designed for survival, and understanding that changes everything. If you'd like to explore more of the ancient instincts that still shape human behavior, subscribe to Primitive Mind Lab. Until next time, stay curious.